Hi guys, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins, and today is the 5th video of an 8-part video series about effective practice techniques. Today we're specifically going to be talking about how to build endurance for your practice sessions. In other words, how do I keep from getting so darn tired? Okay, so there's two primary benefits to not being so tired when you're practicing and just building your endurance overall. So number one would be that you can have longer practice sessions. Obviously, longer practice session means you're putting in more time and you get better faster. The other reason is that if you're not tired, you're having a better practice session. You're much more focused during your practice session and you'll get a lot more accomplished. Okay, so there's 4 primary ways in which you can increase your endurance for your practice session. Number one would be to make sure you always utilize a warm-up routine every time you practice. And I've mentioned this before in my videos, but a warm-up routine is super important. So when you have a warmed up body, you're going to be much less likely to fail when you are practicing. And failing, playing something wrong repeatedly can be really frustrating. And you don't want to be frustrated when you practice. When you're frustrated when you practice, you make even more mistakes and you get even more tired. So definitely make sure you warm up. The second reason why you want to make sure you're warmed up is that it will decrease your pain. So when you try to practice things that are very difficult without being warmed up, you immediately experience pain probably in your fingers, maybe your wrist, or you just feel an overall feeling of discomfort. But long term in your practice session, like say towards the end of your practice session, you might start feeling pain in your back, in your shoulders, in your arm, especially as you get older. And feeling pain while you're practicing is a great motivator to stop practicing. So you want to make sure you're warmed up so you can delay the onset of any kind of pain that you might experience when you're practicing. And then going along with that, the other reason why you want to make sure you're warmed up is because you reduce your risk of injury. You don't want to be experiencing or having to deal with some kind of long-term injury to your body somewhere. Obviously, if you're injured, then that decreases the amount of time you can practice before you start feeling pain. So definitely warming up, making sure your muscles are warmed up, your tendons, all that stuff that's going on in there, all the stuff that you use, making sure you're warmed up and nice and flexible is a great way to avoid injury and also a great way to increase your endurance. Okay, so the second big way in which you can increase your endurance is by taking breaks. And I've mentioned this before as well. So if, they've done studies on the human mind, and most humans, even the best of us, can only focus for maybe 45 minutes at a time, but most people can't really truly focus for 45 minutes, usually maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, so it takes a lot of practice to really be able to be focused for 45 minutes. So if that's the case, let's say you want to put a 2-hour, practice session in or more. Well, I suggest always practicing in 35 to 45 minute blocks of time. So just practice for 35, 45 minutes, and then take a, 10-minute break, go to the restroom, have something to eat, kind of relax a little bit, and then come back. You'll find that if you practice in little blocks of time and you take these little breaks, you'll be able to practice 2 or 3 times as long because you remain fresh. Now, the easiest way to extend the amount of time that you practice during the day is to break your practice sessions up. So, for example, let's say that, now this is perhaps more applicable to a more advanced player, so I don't know where you are in your playing, but if you're a more advanced player and you've got to cover a lot of material, let's say you've got your exercises and your etudes and your warm-up routine and Bach and a sonata, concerto. So you want to break that up. But if you practice multiple times a day, that is the easiest way to get a lot of practice time in. So for example, you could practice in the morning, let's say 2 45-minute sessions, right? So you practice 45 minutes, take a break, practice another 45 minutes. Then you come back in the afternoon or the evening and you do the same thing. So if you do that, it's really easy to get 2.5 hours of practice in one day. And you could even practice 3 times a day. Let's say it's the summer and you got a little bit of extra time. You could practice in the morning, your 2 blocks of 40, 45 minutes, and then you practice just 1 block in the afternoon, let's say. You got a little bit of time, you practice 40, 45 minutes, you eat your lunch, and then maybe later that night, after all your stuff is done, you can put another couple blocks in. Well, you could put in like 3.5, 4 hours of practice every day just by dividing it up like that. And you also remain fresh, and you also retain your energy, and you also retain kind of that excitement for what you're practicing. Okay, and so that brings me to number 3. I suggest that you mix up your practice session. You mix up your pieces. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you've got you've got your warm-up routine, and then you've got an etude, Bach, and a concerto or sonata, right? So you basically got 3 things to practice besides your warm-up. So instead of doing your warm-up and then spending, an entire block of time, let's say 40, 45 minutes on your Bach, well, how about instead, whatever you wanted to learn that day, let's say it's 1 page of Bach, you wanted to learn all the notes to a Bach movement. Instead of learning all those notes in that one practice session, learn half of them. So learn half of the notes for your Bach and then go on to your etude. And let's say it's the same thing with your etude. You got to learn all the notes to 1 page of your etude. So you learn half of them. So with the Bach, you learn half a page and then go to your etude and learn half a page. Now go back to your Bach and learn the other half and review the first half. And then go back to your etude, review the first half, and then learn the second half. So that is an excellent way to do it. And then, let's say for your second practice session, you could do, Bach and then your concerto. But the point is that whatever it is that you've decided you're going to learn that day, just cut it in half and then bounce around between pieces. And an interesting phenomenon exists for practice, and maybe some of you have noticed this, but a lot of times when you practice a piece of music, when you come back to it the next day, it's somehow easier than it was the first day. So let's say you wanted to learn a bunch of notes on 1 page, and you learn them, you can do it with the metronome, and then the next day you come back and everything is just a little bit easier. It was easier than it was the previous day. There's this interesting phenomenon where your brain seems to actually work on things while you're sleeping, or it works on them while you're doing other things. It's very strange, and I don't know exactly what the mechanism is. But when you bounce around with your pieces during your practice session, let's say you practice Bach and then you go to your etude. While you're learning your etude, your brain is still working on that Bach. And then you go back to your Bach, and now it's going to be easier than it was the first time you practiced it. Same with when you go back to the etude. It's going to be a little bit easier than it was the first time you practiced the etude. So your brain can do some pretty amazing things. So if you understand kind of how it works and what its tendencies are, you can take advantage of that and have a much more efficient practice session. Okay, so the last way to easily increase your endurance while practicing is to practice sitting down. Now, there are a lot of pieces that we definitely want to practice standing up, but there's a lot of things that you pretty much will always want to just practice sitting down. So orchestra music, etudes, basically things that are really technical that you may not necessarily perform. They're just technical exercises. Practice those sitting down. That's going to give you more balance because your body is sitting down. It's going to make it easier to manipulate your metronome and stuff like that. And so you're going to end up being a lot more balanced and focused on what you're practicing, and you're not going to get so tired. Now, even when let's say now concertos, that's something you're going to perform. Now, eventually you will want to practice all of that stuff standing up because there's a lot of benefits to standing up when you are practicing, because it helps with your fluidity, helps you be more virtuosic, you're able to move more. But if you're just learning the notes initially for a concerto or sonata or something like that, and you're practicing with the metronome, you're in the beginning stages, practice it sitting down. So your orchestra music, your etudes, your technical exercises, learning the notes to any piece that you're going to perform, just practice sitting down. You're going to find that you've got 20 to 30% more energy just by sitting down and not standing up. So guys, I hope some of this information was helpful to you. And if you have any other kind of questions or comments, just put them in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that little alert bell so you get notification when I create a new video. And don't forget, here at Kennedy Violins, we're all players and teachers. So we're always happy to answer any kind of questions you have anytime. Thanks, guys.